Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us once again. As always, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Hopefully, you've switched off all your communication apps and your emails, and all the critical phone calls have been made. And you're ready to switch off and join Innovatus Media and Fujitsu for what's a really interesting talk track. This one's entitled Secure and Compliant Collaboration, supporting Microsoft 365 for the hybrid workforce. This is a challenging one for a lot of organizations. I mean, we're talking about an application that has high usage and that's gone through like a lot of change since the COVID period, since the times of when I'm sure everybody online was spinning new things up and trying to just make their business work. So now's a good time more than ever to sort of take stock and to really understand what this environment looks like and maybe have a look at some of the red herrings that might come with it. Before we kick off, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which this session's being produced. So it's a very nice autumn day in Sydney. I'm on Gadigal land, so the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present, as well as any elders or emerging leaders that might be with us online today. Now, it is 2023. Everybody has a PhD in tech and ops checks for digital events, but I'll run it through very briefly and hopefully make it fun for you all. The first thing is this is all browser-based today, so any issues, just feel free to refresh the browser, and that should shoot up straight away. I've also got my colleague Simon online, so you can always pop something in the chat if you're having any difficulties, and he'll reach out to you directly. I'll also pop in the chat and say hi. I'll just throw in a hello. Feel free to jump in and say hi. Maybe let us know where you're dialing in from. Give me some ideas maybe for the Easter break, some of the sunnier parts of Australia and New Zealand. So at any point, feel free to jump into that chat. Ask as many questions as you like. We'd love to make it as engaging as possible, and there'll be some really good time for some Q&A after the talk track finishes. So Fujitsu's having a look at this subject matter, and I just wanted, before I introduced Fujitsu and the team at Ubi, Fujitsu company, I just wanted to sort of walk through why and have a look at sort of, where this thought leadership's coming from. So Fujitsu is all around, enhancing the modern workplace. So a lot of the work that they do for enterprises like yourself really looks at sort of how the future workplace will operate, particularly as the digital footprint continues to increase. I'm sure a lot of you online know as well that the digital transformation is really core to this piece, and really having a look at how you can accelerate your business, keep it agile, keep it competitive. And the big one really is, leveraging that R&D that Fujitsu does so well globally. I'm sure you've all seen some of the amazing things that comes out of the organization. And the thing I really like as well is that purpose-driven piece. So it's always great to sort of keep an eye on what Fujitsu is doing in the ESG space. Fundamentally, everything has to come down with social innovation at the core. So definitely jump onto LinkedIn or have a look online and see some of the amazing things that they work throughout Australia and New Zealand. I popped up a poll as well, just to let you know. I'll just have a quick squeeze and see if it's, there's some people coming through already. Oh, great. There's some great responses for you guys. So I'll let that one go and let the guys talk through some of the results as the talk track commences. But on that note, I would like to introduce the group today. Full disclosure, there are a lot of Matts on the call, but so we'll attempt to do first last name as we're walking through. But really excited to have these guys online and walk us through this. So we've got Matt Shaw, who's the consulting and operations manager for Ubi, Matt Hall, the product manager at Fujitsu, and Andrew Bryan, the innovation lead for Ubi, who is not named Matt. So that's the unique piece there. So what I'm going to do is hand you over into the hands of these gentlemen. They'll walk through some of the really cool ideas around this space. and I'll jump back. And yeah, feel free to ask some questions. As always, we really like to see curly questions. Let's stress them out before lunch. So over to you, Andrew.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Matt. Absolutely want to see those questions coming through. And good morning to everyone, and good afternoon to our friends over in New Zealand too. So we've got quite a few fun things to show you today. But before we get into the fun stuff, we need to really talk about the actual cybersecurity challenges and the environment that we're operating in. We'll start with a little bit of the doom and gloom side of things, and then we'll go into the more positive about what we can actually do about it. Microsoft 365, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's the leading productivity tool, SaaS tool in the world at the moment. And we've had lots of adoption over the past few years, especially with the changes that we have from COVID and what that's actually done to businesses and the need for modern workplace and remote working solutions. So when we look at the landscape that Microsoft 365 operates in and how our organizations are functioning, we've got quite a few things from the security and regulatory compliance side of things coming in. Number one, which I'm sure you're all aware, we've got the increased number of threats. Latest updates from the ACSC report is that we're getting a cyber attack every 7 minutes is coming through. So there's a huge volume out there, and we're seeing, look at any number of news articles across the past few months. I don't need to go into the details. I'm sure you're all aware of some of the events that have happened. So we have an increased number of threats coming in. As a response to that, we're also seeing quite the uplift in the regulatory compliance and privacy side of things. We've had updates in Australia to the Critical Infrastructure Act that's broadened the definition of what critical infrastructure means and has called out additional cybersecurity responsibilities for those organisations. And we're seeing the role of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre broadening to what was originally seen, I guess, as a federal government focused cybersecurity agency, as now actually delivering solutions and guidance across the board for critical infrastructure, for government, for all those agencies. When we look at it, though, really, cybersecurity is everybody's business. So it's something that we need to look at. So critical infrastructure has been updated. The Privacy Act has been updated. Now the penalties for a breach, a severe breach or repeat breach, we've seen the fines being increased up to $50 million for organizations that are found to have breached the privacy of their people and their customers. And we've seen the reputational damage coming through. So supporting that, we've also seen health. We're seeing the energy sector also coming in with their own additional requirements for agencies that want to collaborate, organizations that want to leverage the data sets in there. So really across the board, we've got the increase of the cyber attacks, and we've got the additional regulatory compliance requirements, meaning that we really have to focus on building in effective tools and services that can actually assist our organizations, assist our environments to protect the data, to protect the applications, protect our users across the board. So we've got that as one angle, but if we then flip across to the other perspective, and we look at Microsoft 365 and hybrid work, and that's the people. So the impact of COVID has been massive, a huge disruptor to how businesses actually operate. But it was really a change that was happening before that even happened. We could see the rise of flexible working arrangements, of employees wanting more from their workplaces to adjust to how their lives actually operate, how they can provide their value at the same time as adjusting to the needs in their personal lives. Then, of course, COVID came along, massive disruptor, and everybody was sent home. So that's really been embedded into how organizations need to function now. So we can see that the huge percentages, the stats coming out from the census and others show a massive increase in who's actually operating in a hybrid working arrangement, either sometimes in the office, sometimes at home, fully remote. The actual number of users who are full-time in the office, especially from a knowledge worker and information worker perspective, is right down there in the minority. So we need to provide that. In addition, it's not just that where you're working from, but it's actually employee well-being is coming through. So what's the actual experience? And that comes down to the values and culture of an organization, the leadership that's been demonstrated. There's a huge space in there. And we're seeing that workers are actually willing to leave their jobs to go and find better conditions elsewhere. The great resignation, as it's seen across the globe and being coined, the phrase that's been coined, we can see that happening everywhere. So this is a huge concern as we operate businesses, as we operate IT environments, that we need to focus on how do we provide a secure environment that meets the regulatory compliance needs of the organization and protects all the data, at the same time as providing an employee experience that actually delivers the results and the needs of the people that work in our organization, so that we can continue to function and retain our high quality talent. So this combination of factors is where Microsoft 365 really comes in and has a unique value proposition, in that it has the productivity and collaboration tools that you need. It's also got the employee experience side of things in terms of Microsoft Viva and the other tools that are coming along. It's got the ability to automate workflows and provide that really functional working experience. And it has the security capabilities to help you manage your endpoints, manage your devices, allow access to data securely from different locations to control your identity and access management, as well as the entire Defender suite of things. So we've got this capability here. It can help us in our challenge of addressing these two core problems, but it's a massive ecosystem. So we're talking tens of thousands of settings that have to be configured appropriately to actually meet that requirement. And then we've got ongoing changes. So it's quite a dynamic environment that we need to operate in. We're keen to show you how we can actually address some of those concerns. And I'll pass it across to Matt Shaw to give us some more insights into how it can be approached and how we approach it with Ubi and Fujitsu.
Thanks, AB. To your point about employees and keeping people, I think people are really our greatest asset in any organization, Ubi and Fujitsu included. It's hard to get good people, and I think everybody's feeling that at the moment with the great resignation that you spoke about. You can get great ideas and have great processes in place, but if you don't have people to implement them, it's much harder to realize the dreams. In IT, deploying is something that we do all the time, something that we have to stay on top of. There's new technologies, new features, new best practices, new most secure ways of doing things. It feels like every few months there's a new way of doing things and best practice from Microsoft as new features and products are released within the 365 and other areas stack. And forgive the trope that the journey never ends, but it's something that we're always working on, and we're always trying to figure out the best, most secure way of deploying things for our clients. And that is really dependent on points in time within maturity within an organization, and also the best practice that Microsoft has put out for that particular period of time. It might not even be your organization that is making changes within your IT landscape. Microsoft is releasing new features, as we mentioned all the time, with the 20,000 settings that you're talking about, AB. And those features are collaborative by design. And usually the default settings for those features have been set to make it easy to collaborate with people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most secure way of doing things, particularly for your organization. I remember once I was in an Intune course a very long time ago when I was on the tools. I like to think of myself as a recovering techo now. And the portal change happened for Intune midway through my course on a Wednesday. And for the rest of the week, all of our training notes didn't work, and we had to sort of start from scratch on learning the new portal together with the instructor. So it's not something that we're immune to in the industry. So if we're on this never-ending IT configuration journey and we need more people to do it, but we're struggling to find them, and we want to keep those people employed with us and doing cool stuff rather than focusing on things that might be a bit repetitive or clicking a lot of switches or turning a lot of toggles. We want them to be satisfied in their work. We want to get them to do the fun things as much as possible. We've only got a few options, and one of the ways that we've decided to approach it is to try and automate the settings that we do, that we see are the best practice, the most secure way of doing things at many of our clients, and let our team get on with doing the cool stuff. So Perimeter for 365 started as an automation tool to deploy the best settings that we had on offer. We helped author the DTA blueprint with the Digital Transformation Agency, and we'll put a link in the chat later for you to peruse and have a look at those. It's all open source. It's basically, for those who are unfamiliar, it's the federal government way of blueprinting how to deploy Microsoft 365 in the most secure and collaborative fashion. And we really wanted to be able to offer a very rapid deployment of those settings within an environment and make sure that we can assess against the settings within an existing environment as well. So Perimeter for 365 is a tool that lets us do that. I might pass back to you, AB, for a look at Perimeter for 365 and how we can have a squiz at the portal together.
Fantastic, thanks, Matt. Yeah, so I think it's really important. With the work that we actually did in collaboration with the DTA and with Microsoft, setting up the protected utility blueprint, because it was linked to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, the Essential 8 and the ISM, has really given a solid foundation for what a secure Microsoft 365 and functional, because functionality is a huge part of this as well. There's a combination of that security, that functionality in addressing a Microsoft 365 environment in a way that can be used in those highly regulated and secure organizations. So with that link back to the ACSC and the guidance there, it's actually allowed us to take this core configuration that we've developed, and as a principle of doing more with less, we're able to actually apply that to multiple organizations. So the blueprint is available for anybody to have a look at. What we've done is we've built, as Matt said, we've built this tool, Perimeter for 365. It's a SaaS capability, and what it does is taking that baseline of what a known good configuration is, allows you to actually manage and maintain your Microsoft 365 environment ongoing. So the principles behind it is, how can we, as tech experts in this area, that know Microsoft 365, that know compliance, that know the security side of things, how can we take the knowledge that we have and reach as many people as we possibly can and actually enable them, take care of this fundamental technical component and allow organizations to actually continue on with operating their businesses and not spending their time becoming Microsoft 365 experts. You really want to be focused on what's beneficial to you. We can actually fill this gap in here. But when we've only got a small or a confined number of people that would actually have this skill set, what we wanted to do is amplify their capabilities and deliver that skills and knowledge at scale. So that's where we went, right, we're going to need to build this into a tool. So we came along with Perimeter for 365, takes that baseline and allows you to do a range of core things. One of them is you can deploy an entire Microsoft 365 environment rapidly up to that protected utility configuration. But the key thing that we want to go through today is actually, well, what if you've already deployed? What if you're already out there using Microsoft 365, you turn on a whole range of services? Maybe you did it in the pandemic, maybe you did it in a hurry, and you really need to know where are you up to. So what we did was we also built this assessment capability. So Perimeter for 365 SaaS tool, it goes and has read access into your Microsoft 365 environment, the way we set it up. And then it goes and has a look at all of those settings. It looks at how your live environment is actually configured, and then it compares it to the known good baseline that we've developed in line with those ACSC guidelines through the DTA blueprint. So this assessment capability, we can see here in this particular tenant, which is just a training tenant. This is not actively used. It's just one used for demonstration purposes. There's 47,000 different settings. So it's gone and had a look at this and said, okay, tell me everything, all these configuration items that exist in Microsoft 365, what's good, what's bad, what in its very basic form. So where should I be looking? Where should I be focusing my efforts? Or give me some assurance that I've actually configured my environment well and that I know that it's in a good state. So it's gone through, it's had a look at this, it's told us where, yep, aligned to our known good configuration, look pretty good. There's 35,000 settings that are there, and we've got 11,000 that perhaps we should have a look at. Some of those are just going to be generic naming different standards, those kind of things, and they won't matter. But in there, and we have skilled people to assist with this, there's going to be some real gems that are going to give you some rapid insight into how your environment is actually operating. So to give you an idea of the scope, we've got some general ones across things that affect Microsoft 365 across the board, but we've also got the big ticket items like Azure Active Directory, including conditional access. We've got our data classification, data loss prevention side of things, and information protection is down a bit lower. Naming updates to Purview are coming in a next release or a very soon to come release. We've got the Defender suite. So we've got Cloud Apps, Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, Defender for Office 365, all built into this where we're looking at those settings and we're looking at the configuration. We have Exchange Online, we have Intune, we have OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. So it's looking at the config of all of those different services inside Microsoft 365 and providing you insight into where you have potential issues in the configuration that you should investigate further. So this allows you to go through and say, okay, what is my current state? What am I really looking at? And so when we go into, for example, these general settings, we can actually expand it and we can go through and we can filter it down. Let's go. Don't tell me about the compliant things. Just tell me about the ones where there's some recommendations in there. And I'll have a look at them and I'll go, okay, modern authentication. All right, what's happening in this space? So I'll click on it. And now I've suddenly discovered that I've actually got basic authentication still turned on for all of my email-based protocols. So this is going to be sending through clear text and less secure credentials and actually exposing me to potential risk and potential credential theft in there. So I've got a bit of an issue with that. And it's telling me here, the Microsoft 365 configuration, look, you've set it to true. You really should set it to false. And that's the recommendation. And I can go through and I can look at other areas, just a couple of quick examples, and I'll come back to this one to show you what else we can do in Perimeter for 365. But when we go down, we have a look at some others. If we go down to, say, Azure Active Directory, we can go in and we can filter it and we can say, okay, let's look at something we're concerned about collaborating. Okay, let's have a look at our external collaboration settings. How are we setting there? And we can have a look here and we can see, in terms of guest users, we've actually set the Microsoft 365 value to have guest users with some access, and then really we want to go through and restrict them. So what we're looking to do is say, hey, when you've got third parties that you've invited into your organization to collaborate, they should really be controlled in terms of how they can pass on and invite other third parties into your environment. You should maintain control of that the whole time. So we've got some recommendations in that space. And then if we go down to just another quick example, this will be the last one. If we go into Defender for Office 365, we can see in here, oh, I've got some problem with my DKIM settings. So in terms of controlling spam and making sure that I've got the best authenticated experience for my email coming in and out of the organization, really, I should be going through and turning this on. It's pretty straightforward. It's just some DNS values that I need to configure, and there's very good guidance from Microsoft in terms of how to do this. But at the moment, I've actually got it turned off. So there's a quick example of something I can go through, and I can actually uplift my email security posture and start guarding against additional spam and phishing attacks that are coming through. So whenever we look at this this assessment, we can actually go through and identify a clear set of items to be updated and to be resolved. And we didn't need to run a lengthy project. We didn't need to sit down and have interviews with infrastructure teams and the SharePoint team and the security team to actually do this. All of the data can actually be pulled out automatically. And we can do this very efficiently to provide some guidance around how you can actually uplift your environment. So we're going to talk more about that in detail. As a very quick sneak peek to close out this, assessment is only one portion of Perimeter for 365. So if I go back to this specific example I had before and I go to modern authentication, if I go through, we'll everywhere have this button, which is Microsoft Portal. I think I'm going to need to share that tab. And that's going to actually give me the ability to see directly into the specific setting, specific portal within Microsoft 365 in order to grab and configure the setting to the level I need it to be. Okay. What we can do from there, demos as we do them live, always fun. is I can actually go through and fix that setting. It'll take me to exactly where I need it to be, and I'll get it. And then once I've actually resolved it, I can come into my compliance screen, and I can actually do the ongoing tracking of that specific setting. So where I've got those basic authentication mechanisms turned on, I go directly to the portal that I need. I actually turn it off. So I've actually set it to where it needs to be, into the appropriate configuration. And then this compliance tab, what it does is it actually tracks all of those settings ongoing. So once I've implemented my plan, I've uplifted the configuration to the level that it needs to be. What I want to do is make sure that it stays that way in the future. So what will happen is in the compliance tab is it will save the baseline essentially as a snapshot of your configuration, and it'll say, right, for my organization, the appropriate setting is that that basic authentication is turned off. So we'll disable it, and then we'll track it in here. And every 15 minutes, Perimeter for 365 is going to go in and check that live setting and say, right, is that basic authentication still turned off? Yes, it is. Great. We're going to come up green. We're going to be compliant, and we're going to say yes. Nobody has been in there modifying that setting. Nobody has deviated from our baseline and introduced a new security risk into our organization. So from there, if somebody does make the change deliberately or inadvertently because they're just trying to get something to work, we're going to get a flag in here. It's going to come up and say it's actually non-compliant. It's going to say there's a deviation in the live configuration to what's stored in the baseline. And you can rapidly, as an administrator, come in and grab a non-compliant setting, and everywhere in here, there is the ability to go through and remediate the setting. What this will do is fire up an authentication prompt. You'll put in the admin credentials needed to actually perform the change, and Perimeter for 365 will fire off the automation to return the baseline setting to the Microsoft 365 environment. You don't need to know which portal to go to. You don't need to know how to update it to its previous value, and where it is, it will actually do that exactly for you, all audited and all tracked in there. So from here, you've assessed your environment, you've found out the issues, you've developed a plan, you've implemented those changes, you've now saved them as your baseline, and you can track those changes ongoing. So the power is there in the tool for you to really accelerate that process of uplifting the environment to the state that you need to be. And so we're very keen to help you with this. So I'm going to pass over to Matt Hall, our very good friend from Fujitsu, who's going to run through how Fujitsu can actually help in this space.
Thanks for that, AB. Yeah, thank you for that. That was a fantastic demo. I have sat and seen this demo many times, but if I reflect back to the first time I saw this, it was during the very early days of the M&A process, and I just could not help but be amazed at the power of Perimeter 365. I was extremely excited to be able to talk about it, but I couldn't share any of that information with anybody. So once it became public and the merger had occurred, it really came to how can Fujitsu best leverage this technology. And I couldn't help but compare to how we would have achieved similar outcomes ourselves in the past. And it's probably a very common story that I would expect a lot of our customers have been through as well. And that is, if you're starting that journey for 365, there's potentially that large scale build up front assessment of what the requirements are, what are the needs. If you're looking at various industry regulations or industry standards, in the past it's been very difficult. As the Kiwi on the call, dealing with a lot of our customers are looking towards the NZISM as a guidance to how the technology should be used and adopted, but it doesn't really go down to the level of what the configuration needs. So there's a lot of effort spent trying to map out those standards to the technology for 365. And those investigations, those design work, that could take weeks, if not months, depending on how many features of 365 you want to light up. Moreover, because of the sheer scale of 365, a lot of customers that we deal with might only try to bite off small chunks. It might be the concept of deploying Microsoft Intune. There might be some early adopters of Microsoft Teams or SharePoint. And so from a security compliance perspective, it's all done very piecemeal, and depending on who does what, you can potentially be exposed to what those challenges are. So what we've developed with Ubi is the M365 Assessment Accelerator. We're essentially taking that large build-up front effort, and we're able to, as AB described, scan the environment and getting all of that technical information up front within 1 day of deploying the toolset into a customer environment. That allows us to then, rather than just clicking through portals and screen capturing current settings, which once again, as I say, can take weeks, we get that information and then we'll sit down with our customers over a 10-day period and we'll work through what the intent of 365 was for that customer, potentially probing questions on early things that we've found within the tenancy to understand the intent of what that configuration is. And what we will do is within that 10-day period, we will not only identify some of those low-hanging fruit or issues that we can fix automatically, but also identify opportunities on how we can best leverage 365. It's, as I say, it's a large platform, and a lot of customers do struggle with the complexity of 365, what they're entitled to use, what they're not entitled to use. And this accelerator that we've got on screen today is really about parking the technical side of things. We can do that part up front within the first day, leveraging the tool set, and then working through what a plan for a security uplift would look like. What are the next steps, and what are the opportunities to really transform? And I guess pulling at the thread of what Mr. Shaw was talking about earlier is this approach really allows our people and your people to do the more important stuff rather than clicking through all of those portals and doing that manual assessment. It really starts to shift that conversation from how do we set the platform up to how do we best leverage and enable and adopt the platform, looking at driving that business change within your organizations and maximizing that investment in 365. So I guess what I wanted to talk about is say we do have this offer on screen where we can do that rapid assessment within 10 days. We'll output a tailored report to your requirements based on what you're using today, as well as provide a guidance and recommendations on what that uplift and that roadmap would look like, and work with you to figure out what those next steps are. What I want to talk about is some of the common findings from this assessment. So we've run this with some of our Lighthouse customers, and Ubi have obviously had a history here on delivering this to their customer base. But some of the common findings that we have when we run this tool within a customer environment, and one that stands out for me is the data location aspect of it. Being the Kiwi on the call, being the Kiwi on the team, it's quite relevant knowing that Microsoft is about to release their Azure data center footprint in New Zealand within the next few months. And within 90 days, the 365 services will be greenlit. This will give New Zealand customers the opportunity to shift those workloads back on shore. And that may meet some of the compliance requirements around data sovereignty. Now, what we're also seeing is when we run the scan at the moment, any customer that was an early adopter for Microsoft Teams may not be aware that their Teams data location is probably set to Asia Pacific rather than Australia. It's something that may have, I said, an early adopter before the capability was available in Australia, or it may be overlooked. What Perimeter is going to do is quickly identify that there's a data sovereignty or data location issue that can be addressed. And part of that plan will be to actually shift that workload out of Asia Pacific into Australia or New Zealand. Not only is that going to provide the security compliance and an alliance to your current policies, but it also improves the performance and user experience of leveraging Microsoft Teams. Other than that, I'd just like to hear from AB and Matt about some of the common findings that that you've picked up during your assessment for customers.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I can tell you for sure that every time we run one of these assessments, we always find something. there's always something in there, whether it's because a project was run a while ago, or there's an outstanding piece of work that we're really trying to get to, or just because Microsoft has introduced a new feature or changed a default setting in there. There's always something that we can come across. One of the topical ones we've got there, the social media integrations piece from a security perspective is really interesting. We've actually had over the last 12 months, the head of ASIO has actually come out a few times talking about how malicious actors are actually leveraging profiles on LinkedIn and Facebook and other platforms to actually identify targets for social engineering. So looking at seeing who works in which particular departments and where they're sitting and potentially even what their security clearances are, so you can know exactly who would have access to the various bits of information. And as Matt Shaw mentioned, the Microsoft way of doing things, they've built this platform that is designed to work across any industry in there. So their approach is, okay, we're going to start from a collaborative approach. It's going to have a good level of security, but it's going to be flexible in terms of how people can use it. And what that means is there's actually some of the social media integration features and connections to LinkedIn that are turned on by default. So you have some information sharing, or you have a capacity to easily link that information across from Azure AD into LinkedIn. And that potentially can lead to employees inadvertently publishing information or sharing more information than they intended. So you can really easily go through these ones are just tick boxes. They're just items that you can go in and turn on and off, and it can just immediately uplift the cybersecurity posture and just help protect all of your employees as they're navigating through all these different tech platforms, which is an ongoing challenge. So yeah, that's a particularly interesting one. Yeah, Matt Shaw, any of your key standouts?
Certainly, the social media stuff is very easy to turn off and increase your security posture very quickly. There's very little user impact. I don't think people are going to get particularly upset that they can't link their LinkedIn to their Azure AD persona, I guess, so to speak. The thing about legacy auth that we often find is that it's partially disabled. You showed in your demo, AB, that there's just from a email perspective, there's 6 or 8 settings that you've got to checkbox, and I'm sure they're all in a single, like, easy to read blade that you can just like search at the top and you can just make it happen. But there's also conditional access components that are in there, and we find those things during the scan to say, here are the things that we have seen in other clients that we'd recommend that you investigate. And we often find things that were reported to be disabled, or there's now a new component that Microsoft recommends has changed, and then we just sort of dot the I's and cross the T's, so to speak, with some of those at the end there. I guess the other thing I wanted to say that's not listed on this slide is that we often find ways for clients to do more with what they have. So Microsoft E5, I mean, there's 70 or 80 products and features that you have within that license structure, and I don't profess to know every single one of them because it's changing like the weather, but we often find that clients have things that come up within our assessment to say, oh, this feature that you already own and are licensed for has not been enabled yet. Did you want to investigate having that feature turned on or migrating from a different tool set that you already have in place and saving the company money in terms of licensing costs? If you've got an existing AV technology, but you're already paying for Defender for Endpoints, then you can migrate to Defender for Endpoints relatively easily, and then you can sunset that that other technology that you're paying extra on top of your E5 licensing for. We've had clients turn on Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Cloud, Defender for Endpoints. Anything with Defender written on it is something that is usually easily turned on to a baseline level, and then you can build from there to increase your posture in sort of a just-in-time fashion. One time in a client deployment, we discovered a feature that Microsoft had deployed sort of overnight, but it was highlighted in the P365 portal that as something that was available to be monitored, and the client wouldn't have known that that feature was on the E5 list because it was sort of released a bit quietly from Microsoft. And we had a discussion with them on how to turn it on, what the best practice was, and they were able to deploy the new capability rapidly with no license costs associated with it. So they were able to increase their posture with no money down, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing I like about those ones as well is just the transparency that you can get pretty much straight away. You can go into Defender for Cloud Apps, the CASB solution, or you can go into other areas within Defender and just say, just link it. Yeah, just give me the data, start collecting it. A lot of the things aren't actually enabled by default, but that's the first step is, okay, can I actually get all my data sources together so I can see what my issues are and then start interrogating along the way? So at the same time, you've gone and saved money, you've replaced your endpoint protection product, and then you've also uplifted your visibility and your control across the environment. And you didn't have to go and buy another tool and then spend months on the integration piece about how they actually communicate with each other. It's all just there. And I should mention that, so from a report perspective, it's really pragmatic about how we actually structure this, because we know there are going to be a range of things that are going to have an impact to employees, to end users, that are going to be disruptive, but it's not everything. There's absolutely a range of things that you could actually do tomorrow, where you could turn them on, you could uplift your security, you could improve the employee experience without having a huge disruption. So you can go through, and we can show you that list and go through it. Here's the ones you can enable, and then you get your quick wins on the board. You start building trust with your organization. IT starts delivering, business starts, increasing the relationship in there, and then you can start looking at sort of the medium-sized ones where, yes, it's got some employee impact, but it has really high benefits. So let's do those ones. And then you finish on those larger transformation exercises where you go, okay, this is part of our business strategy. It's really going to change the way that people are going to operate. So we'll need to get that organizational change management in there. But if you've done the ones beforehand where you've really actually shown that you can work successfully and demonstrate that value, you can build that relationship and that trust and get the buy-in necessary to actually finally finish off those big ticket items and move the organization forward.
And we obviously take into account with the discussions that we have with all of our clients, we take into account the individual circumstances that you have within your organization. There's obviously going to be existing investments in certain products. I know that we said you can migrate to Defender for Endpoints if you feel that way inclined, but of course, if you've got an investment or you prefer a certain product, then we're not going to try and push anything onto our clients for the sake of hitting a number. We're very outcomes focused in the way we want to achieve a better security posture for each and every organization.
Great. Thanks for that, guys. Definitely pulling on that thread of do more for less is looking at some of the polls and coming through in terms of what people are interested in and, reducing IT cost and spend. Lighting up E5, lighting up 365 is a surefire way of achieving those outcomes, mainly because customers that are already licensed for these products, they're already paying for it. What this tool set and what Perimeter does and what this assessment would do is highlight those areas of opportunity. And as you said, there's some stats coming out of Microsoft at the moment looking at the connected security ecosystem of 365. And when you look at the outcome that you're trying to achieve, and if you were to stitch that together with a bespoke solution, there's potentially an 80% cost going with third-party solutions. So being able to maximize that investment in 365 and actually start turning these services on, and having a pre-configured secure and compliant baseline from Perimeter is a very good way to shortcut that and accelerate that adoption. And as I think we've all said, is it's one thing to enable this technology, and if we can do that faster, it means that effort can be spent on driving that employee experience, that user adoption of the new technologies and that organizational change management to actually start to leverage this to drive that hybrid workplace, enable new capabilities for the end users, rather than spending all that time and effort up front trying to get a secure design, through the various architectural design boards and approval gates when most of your project budget's then gone. So definitely recommend that. Have a click on the link on the Discover More and have a look at what information we've provided. There's a white paper available there as well, which covers some of the security concerns that we've highlighted today. And I just want to jump through to our Q&A section of this call and see if there's any questions that we can answer from the audience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt and AB. It was a really interesting session. I think, that demo and just like the speed and ease, I really get where you're coming from, Matt Hall, when you saw it the first time, and just the power of it, which is great. So guys, feel free to pop through some questions. We've got a little bit of time for some questions. Some have already come through, which is great. So we'll look to walk through those. This one comes through from Andrew. You kind of looked at it in that last slide, which is always kind of the case. What standard settings do you see from O365 that you think we should know about from a security perspective? Is there any sort of like red herring sort of blind spots that you're constantly observing that people are like, oh, aha, like a bit of an aha moment?
I think for me, the legacy or thing, like we talked about before, it's common to have one or two of the components that haven't been quite configured the way that they should be or the way the best practice recommends. Yeah. And that's normally through no fault of the organization, because Microsoft best practice, as we've talked about, changes like the weather. And of course, Microsoft 365 as an ecosystem is a lot of different apps in the trench coat. So they don't often all honor their individual settings as a group, I guess. So if you're going to be switching it in one place, normally you have to wax on and wax off in two different places to make them talk. A good example is integrating with Defender for Endpoints and Intune in the Endpoint Manager console. You need to do it on both ends of the app. It's sort of like a trust relationship between the two. You need to flag it on both ends. And if you only do it on one side, you might get a pending hanging out, not ready to go. It's like, I'm waiting for you to do it in the other console. And particularly in large organizations where you don't have access to both consoles, you might be saying, oh, well, I've done it on my end. Yeah. And that's sort of as far as you can get under your own steam, and you've got to do a change order to get the other end sorted. But with this type of report assessment that's across the whole suite, you can flag it as an organization pretty quickly that it's half enabled and you're not actually getting the benefit you thought you were.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to that one. I think just sort of related is conditional access is a big one when we're looking at how people are connecting, authenticating, is really going through your conditional access policies and the priority orders and managing your exceptions so that you make sure that it is delivering the outcome that you're expecting, and that there aren't situations where people will actually pass through the whole process and either not be prompted or not have the same controls you're expecting.
And something you can do yourself with that is the what if tool is your friend. It's very useful to point you in the right direction for any policies that are going to be causing you grief that you didn't think were applying to your particular user. You can say, I'm logging in with my user from this location on this sort of device or this IP address or this range, and it'll give you a very useful report to say, here are the conditional access policies that are going to apply.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Yeah, it's super proactive, and I think that environment changing so much, with Microsoft and how many updates and, companies that they're purchasing and all those sorts of things. Chris had a question around the product itself. So how's the product licensed?
Yep. So from a licensing perspective, Perimeter for 365 is per user, per month, per tenant. So looking at how you administer it, it's a subscription. As I said, it is a SaaS offering. And then there's 12-month is the standard base offering, but there's multi-year options where, can talk discounts and consolidating things. And if you've got multiple environments to manage, we can have conversations around that. But basic process is, look at the number of users, active licensed users is what we're talking about. And then there's a per monthly fee from there.
Sorry, go on, Matt.
Just to add to that as well, we do have the assessment accelerator as well, which is a fixed price, fixed outcome solution. So for that, we're leveraging the power of Perimeter to do that scan, do that tool. As AB mentioned, it's a SaaS product. It's connected into the customer environment just through a secure service principal, relatively quickly and painless to set up and to get that value. And we'll leverage that tool to actually generate that tailored report for you. And at the end of that 10-day engagement, you'll get the outcomes from Perimeter, and you'll get the report that we've generated with that roadmap as well. So that's a kind of like a try before you buy type approach if you want to see the true value of what we can find. And we'll be doing obviously a demo for the follow-up configuration drift features that AB had mentioned and gave you a sneak peek on. As well as some of the other connected features that Perimeter can have, and how it can not only do this assessment part, but how it can potentially optimize your administration workflows and processes once you've got that secure baseline in place, and how you can leverage it from a service delivery perspective and implement that into your BAU standard operating procedures.
Yeah, wonderful. Very timely as well. We've just popped up that Microsoft 365 Accelerator. So feel free to click through to that, and we'll make sure to connect you with the teams. There's a good question here from VJ. When is the best time to avail Perimeter 365 Accelerator or the assessment service? So should you have run O365 for a while, or could you also do it during the design phase? So what are your reflections there, and how are customers sort of, when are they choosing to sort of have a look at this challenge?
Yeah, so from a product perspective, Perimeter for 365, you can run at any stage of your journey. So whether you're looking to migrate, because there is deployment, we didn't show it, but there's deployment capability to actually rapidly get you set up to that secure baseline. So that when you start lighting it up and onboarding your people, you've actually got a secure baseline to function from. So you could have actually started the process there. The assessment accelerator is designed around have you actually been operating for a while, and let's get an understanding of the current state. But absolutely, it's not the only option. So regardless of where you are, there are options that can be put in place regardless of where you are. And if you've been running for ages and you're actually pretty happy with your baseline in there, it's the ongoing configuration tracking, configuration monitoring side of things, where you can go, okay, I know my baseline's solid. Let's save that as a snapshot, and we'll just track the changes incrementally, and we'll just look at adapting it as new features come from Microsoft. So it doesn't matter where you are. The assessment accelerator definitely pitched at if you've already done the move and you want to know where you're at and where you can get more out of it or increase your cybersecurity. But definitely we can tailor things regardless of where you're up to.
Awesome. Also, there was a question that I had, just given the breadth of verticals on the call as well. How do you look to integrate sort of industry-specific compliance measures into this? Is that something that is more bespoke, or particularly sort of for healthcare and FSI and things that can go pretty deep?
Yeah, so the key thing there is, as I mentioned early, the ACSE is our base. So there's two answers to this. One is you're already working from a solid base if you're looking at the ISM guidance in there, and especially health has come up with new policies for accessing My Digital Health Record in terms of systems that need to connect to it, need to comply with the updated conformance policies, which is based on the ISM and the ACSE guidance. So that's going to relate really easily. It's going to be a clear correlation between what we can assess and what's there. With that said, we actually have a new feature releases coming a little bit later this year, which are specifically targeted at the different industry standards that you might be looking at across different. So if we're looking financial services, if we're looking at CPS 234 and APRA kind of requirements, or there's even we're looking at the sort of global standards. What if you need to do business overseas? You need to look at GDPR, or you want to align with NIST. That's all sort of down the track on the roadmap.
Oh, that's really, really cool. Yeah, and oh, sorry, Matt, go on.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, as we've been looking at those different standards as we're developing the feature set that's coming shortly, the standards overlap quite a lot because good security practice is good security practice, regardless of which industry you work in. So as AB mentioned, from an ASC/SC and ISM perspective, you're at a very good baseline to start with, and then you're going to have industry-specific settings on top of that. And I mean, every client that we have has a tweak to the baseline.
Yeah.
We start with our baseline as a good baseline base, and then we build upon it whatever the client needs to meet their regulatory standards, or maybe they've got a particular interest in a certain Essential 8 component as an example, and we can build that compliance standard on top of that.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, just quickly, you just mentioned, and to add to that, it's like, we expect you to do that. Like that's the way you actually adopt and
It's
use it.
built into the tool, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have, if you choose not to use Defender because you love your endpoint protection tool in there, we're not going to want this thing to be flagging red. You've got problems all the time. No, you just accept we've actually mitigated that somewhere else, and that's our baseline, and that's appropriate for us. So whatever it is, you might have a specific business use case that means that you need to deviate from the policy, that you are immensely collaborative because you provide services direct to the public and other agencies and things. Then those settings are going to be different to somebody that's really just looked internally to their own organization. So start with the guidance, start with the assessment, understand where you are, identify those areas, and then save that baseline as your baseline, the one that works for you, and track the changes ongoing.
Yeah, awesome. And probably finally, guys, a big thanks for everybody that's popped through some questions. But what does this, when you're working with your customers, what does this process typically look like prior to using this platform? Do you feel that, organizations are sort of doing this in a bespoke way, or maybe not doing it at all and might be slightly blindsided by some of the findings? Like, what are your reflections there when you sort of have kickoff conversations?
I think it's popped up several times in conversation, where one of the biggest controls that customers try to apply and think they've applied been the conditional access tools. And we get that feedback from the customer going, oh, we thought we'd done that already. And so we're highlighting that it's similar to the legacy auth. These settings are spread right across different portals and different settings, and customers do struggle with where these things are. And if you're looking at the security tools within Defender, for example, other than its name changing almost every 12 months, the number of portals, the consolidation of portals, and then the separation of portals, we find that, in some cases, customers didn't even know that there was a compliance center within 365. So all of those configuration to deal with compliance is just not set because they've been looking at the security portal. So the tool itself, as demoed, is a nice single pane of glass that really paints that full picture of what 365 is. And unless you're a trained administrator and you have a deep knowledge and following Microsoft changes on a regular basis, it is very challenging to get that full visibility of the customer environment without a tool like Perimeter.
And that's a pretty tall order to be an entire Microsoft 365 trained and up-to-date admin, because there's so many settings and so many tools.
And that's the whole beauty of the environment, right? It continues to adapt and bring in new ways of working. We are almost about to hit time, but Jojo's just snuck in at the end with a great question. For a company with a global footprint, do you have any consultancy to help map different country regulatory compliances? How's it done? Is this something that you're looking at as well? How organizations can manipulate it according to location?
Short answer is yes. Absolutely. Don't want to give too much away at this point, but definitely the vision for the product is there's a lot of different ways we can deploy this at scale, managing multiple environments to different regulatory standards, and just to increase the efficiency of and distribution of updates and changes as you go forward. So absolutely the global approach, and that's the relationship now that we have as a division of Fujitsu gives us access to, as you mentioned, the research and development and the scale and the teams globally to assist with those activities.
And we're happy to have a chat about it.
Yeah,
for sure, Wajoyo. It is a great question because, you know, particularly in heavily, you know, secure and compliant verticals like FSI, a lot of the times you feel like you're just doing risk and compliance. So, guys, thanks so much for taking us through that. That was a tremendous session. And I've got to say, just personally, the UX on that demo I've seen a lot of demos, and it's really, really cool. And it just makes it feel easy. So really, really great. And definitely like, as you said, like a known unknown or a blind spot, or just bringing it all together and in that single pane of glass. So a big thanks for taking us through that. For everybody on the call, definitely don't leave this as being the final discussion point. Firstly, feel free to share the session. It's available on demand. So if you'd like to share it with your team and you want to sort of, you know, kickstart some conversations around how you might want to look at this differently, feel free to do so. And as always, IT ecosystems are so critical. So definitely feel free to reach out to the team at Ubi, even Fujitsu Ubi, and ask them the tough questions and give them the opportunity to get to know your environment, because I'm sure they've seen it all at this point, so it can add some really, really good value. Until next time, guys, I hope you have a tremendous finish to your week. And again, as always, I note that pretty much everybody stayed on to the end, so we always really appreciate your time and hope you got a lot out of it, and look forward to seeing you next time with some more content. So thanks so much, and thanks to the two Matts and AB.
Thanks, Matt.
Cheers,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Cheers, gents. Have a great day.